The 80s were iconic. The fashion, the music, and most importantly, the cinema. The 80s gave us the most iconic horror movies and science fiction movies. And if you find yourself disagreeing, don't worry. By the end of this video, I'm sure I'll be able to change your mind. In today's video, we'll be looking into the iconic villains from the science fiction movies that came out in the 80s that literally shaped the science fiction genre as we know it. So get some snacks and let's get into it. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Darth Vader. Star Wars. The year was 1977, and the movie titled Star Wars was released. It was this epic interstellar space adventure of a young boy, Luke Skywalker. Now, obviously, every hero needs a villain, right? But there was something very special about the villain of this movie. Clad in black from top to bottom, a towering figure entered the screen. With his face obscured with a mechanical helmet and an eerie mechanical hiss as a sound of his breathing, Darth Vader was someone who struck terror in every viewer's heart. He was merciless, brutal, and efficient when it came to achieving his goals. With his lightsaber and telekinetic abilities of the Force, this man was the one who led the army of the Empire in a campaign against the Rebel Alliance. From the first time you see him on screen, you know this foe won't be an easy one to beat. 3 years later, in 1980, when Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back came out, we got a twist that shook everyone to their core. Turns out, Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father, Anakin Skywalker. This is such an iconic scene in movie history that even people who have never seen Star Wars know about this line. And eventually, in The Return of the Jedi, which came out in 1983, Darth Vader turned against the Empire to save his son's life. But why is Darth Vader such an iconic villain? Well, it's because Anakin Skywalker is a tragic hero who ended up turning to the dark side. After all, he loved. Yep, that's right. The main reason why Anakin became Darth Vader was out of love. Let me explain. So, Anakin was a young boy living on the planet named Tatooine with his mother, Shmi. He was a bright child. He wanted to solve problems, and he was exceptionally good with machinery. He wanted to be free, and when the opportunity presented itself in Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn, Anakin took it. He survived the dangerous pod racing and won his freedom. It was discovered that he's sensitive to the Force. In fact, to an exceptional extent. Eventually, he was accepted into the Order as Obi-Wan Kenobi's apprentice. It was very evident that this boy was rather impressive, and he kind of became friends with the Supreme Chancellor Palpatine. Obi-Wan was like a brother to Anakin, but Palpatine was like a father. Despite being a very promising Jedi, Anakin couldn't completely follow the principles of the Jedi. He was a man of people, not principles, and eventually he fell in love with Padme Amidala. However, the increasing political turmoil and the visions of Padme dying in childbirth really affected Anakin. He turned to the Jedi, hoping they'd help him save the one he loved, but the Jedi wanted him to accept the fate as it would be, and Anakin couldn't bear it. When he turned to his father figure Palpatine, he was given comfort. Palpatine told him that if he joined him, he'd be able to save Padme. All the people Anakin was close to until now became irrelevant to Anakin, just because Padme might die, and Anakin was ready to prevent it because that's just how much he loved her. So, he betrayed everyone, sided with Palpatine, who's actually a Sith, and became a Sith Lord. Obviously, Obi-Wan wasn't going to just sit there and watch his friend turn to the dark side. Eventually, they fought, and Obi-Wan maimed Anakin, leaving him behind next to the lava pit. However, Palpatine saved him and gave him a mechanical suit that also worked as life support, and Darth Vader was born. At the end of the day, Anakin fulfilled the prophecy as the Chosen One. He was the one who ended up bringing balance to the Force, by first annihilating the Jedi under Palpatine's command, and then killing the Emperor with his own hands, bringing an end to the reign of the dark side. And he did all of this out of love. He joined the Jedi, hoping that would keep his mother safe. He joined the Sith, hoping that would keep his wife safe. He killed the Emperor to keep his son safe. Who would have thought that the most iconic villain would also be the most tragic hero to ever exist? Alien Queen, Aliens 1986. Who doesn't love Ellen Ripley? She's arguably the best protagonist in a sci-fi horror movie. She stays calm, keeps cool, and takes all the right steps. So, for such a strong protagonist, we need just as strong of an antagonist, right? And we get that as the Alien Queen. The Alien Queen is the queen bee of the alien's hive. She's the one who produces the eggs and expands the hives. Out of these eggs, drones and soldiers come out, whose main goal is to ensure she's protected. They hunt down anyone who might pose a danger to her. She's much larger than all of her offspring, being almost 15 feet in height. She's absolutely huge, with her ovipositor on her lower torso. She also has 2 pairs of arms and has a large flat carapace, which looks like a crown that protects her head. It's very clear that apart from these biological changes in the Queen, she's also highly intelligent in comparison to her offspring. She understood human behavior, as we saw when Ripley threatened to burn her eggs. Then, a bargain was struck. The Queen called back her soldiers soldiers so that Ripley could leave her hive without any conflict. However, when Ripley burned the eggs anyway, the Queen seemed to scream in agony and chased her around with a vengeance. The Queen even hid herself in the landing gear and followed them back to the USS Sulaco. Aliens truly brought out this whole mom versus mom boss fight that I wasn't expecting. But hey, I'm not complaining. Given how terrifying the xenomorph was in the first movie, the Queen in the second movie was definitely a huge upgrade, which upped the stakes spectacularly. The Predator, 1987. When I watched the movie for the first time, I looked at the entire military rescue team and found myself wondering who could go up against these beefcakes. I mean, hey, let's be honest. Looking at Arnold's physique in that movie, it was pretty given that no human would be able to take him down. So when the Yautja was introduced, you better believe I was super pumped. Yautja, or the Predator as we call them, are a dangerous species who literally hunt other dangerous species for sport and honor. On Earth, we are the apex predators. So, to think that there was someone out there much more advanced than we are, who could hunt us like people hunt birds or rabbits, was shocking, to say the least. The Predator is terrifying at first because he's straight up invisible. How do you fight an invisible enemy? How do you kill something you can't see? But when he did become visible, it wasn't like that helped any of us because, oh boy, the Predator is taller, more muscular, and definitely has far more advanced technologies in comparison to our military group. And their horrific face that opened up just gave me the heebie-jeebies. While it's true that at the end of the movie, our hero did manage to defeat the Predator, it was quite clear that he only managed it because he managed to outwit him with the booby traps. Even then, in his dying breath, the Predator was more than happy to beat Bop on his device and start a self-destruct sequence, which would have almost killed Dutch, Arnold's character, if he'd not jumped out of the way at the right time. If there's someone who can get in a physical brawl with Arnold Schwarzenegger at his peak physicality and still overpower him, then I definitely don't stand a chance against that creature. But I think most of you would agree with my sentiments. The Thing, 1982. I bet John W. Campbell Jr. never thought that his novella, Who Goes There, published in 1938, would ever end up becoming a cult classic in the science fiction horror genre. But of course, it did. With John Carpenter in the director's chair, there was no way this movie could have disappointed me. And I was right, it did not. Who Goes There is a story about a group of American scientists who go to Antarctica for research purposes and end up finding this extraterrestrial life form, all frozen up in a block of ice. Eventually, the ice thaws and the extraterrestrial life form comes out and starts taking the form of whatever living thing it comes in contact with. Paranoia, panic, dread rise amongst the crew as no one knows who's real and who is the thing. John Carpenter did such an amazing job with his movie. In the film, the story follows American researchers who see this sledge dog being chased by a Norwegian guy in a helicopter. He was trying to shoot at the dog and came into the American Research Center territory. The Norwegian guy ends up blowing the whole helicopter up and is eventually shot in defense. But that definitely raised quite a few eyebrows. So helicopter pilot R.J. McCready, played by the phenomenal Kurt Russell, and Dr. Cooper decides to go to the Norwegian base for some answers, as one does. But all they find there are charred remains of weird, malformed humanoids and frozen corpses. Yeah, not a good sign. Soon enough, the news goes from bad to worse because the sledge dog that they rescued turns out to be the Thing. It attacks the research members one by one, and at the peak of the movie, you can understand the stress. No one knows who is the Thing or who is not the Thing. People are fighting over power, but no one knows if they're doing it because they want to be safe or because they're the Thing who wants to exploit them. I mean, it's a brilliantly performed movie. With its harrowing physical effects, you can genuinely feel the dread of the characters. The Thing is such an iconic villain because it's so hopeless to fight against something that you can't not even distinguish from your friends. The best bet is to lock down everything and kill everyone. But humans are not inherently ruthless killers, so that would indeed be difficult to achieve. T-800, The Terminator, 1984. We got Arnold back on the list, guys, but this time not as a hero. In this 1984 movie, Arnold played the unstoppable, invincible, and almost unkillable Terminator, killer robot sent from the future. The Terminator may look like us at first glance, but it's nothing like us. The skin we see on it? Yep, that's like a cybernetic tissue created by Skynet. Who is Skynet? Well, good question. It's a super advanced computer with artificial intelligence. Eventually, it gained sentience and decided that the humans were a threat to its existence. So, it created robots like our Terminator. With believable skin on their faces, these Terminators look like regular humans, but they're made of hyperalloy instead of calcium. The main goal of the Terminator is to kill their targets as soon as they can. When Skynet was in full reign in the future, there was a human resistance active against it, wanting to shut down Skynet. The main guy leading this resistance was John Connor, so Skynet, the mega computer, decides to send the Terminator back in time and kill John's mother so that he's never born. By proxy, the resistance is never created. Seeing this robot relentlessly chase Sarah around throughout the runtime of the movie movie is genuinely fear-inducing. Nothing she does stops it. It just keeps getting back up. Even when she shoots it and tries to blow it up, nothing works. In the last act, when we see Sarah crushing the Terminator with a hydraulic press, it really feels like a breath of relief because, thank God, the Terminator can be killed. But just like the Predator, they're not an easy target. Darth Cyas, the Emperor, Return of the Jedi, 1983. While Darth Vader was killed out of necessity, or because he wanted to save someone, Darth Cyas is nothing like this. This guy right here is evil to his core, complete sadist, and he enjoys every second of it. Sheev Palpatine may look like a very nice, trustworthy old fellow when you first see him, but don't be fooled. He orchestrated the invasion of Naboo and placed himself as the Supreme Chancellor because he wanted to control the entire galaxy. Although the door to that dream closed with Darth Maul seemingly being killed by Obi-Wan, a window opened with Anakin Skywalker's entry into the picture. Anakin wanted a father figure to look up to. Palpatine was more than happy to slowly but surely manipulate this young Jedi into having a dark and ambitious side. Eventually, when he could get Anakin on his team, his rise to power was smooth sailing. He went from Supreme Chancellor to Emperor, and his rule as Emperor was pretty unchallenged until, well, when Luke showed up and destroyed the Death Star. But he was intrigued by the boy and wanted him to join the dark side too, like his father. So he laid out a trap for the boy. While the Death Star looked incomplete, it was fully operational after the repairs. When Luke showed up, hoping to bring his father to the light side of the Force, Darth Cyas played with the boy's feelings. He insisted the boy use his hatred and his rage to strike down his father, and Luke fell for it. The duel almost killed Darth Vader, exactly what Cyas needed to take the boy under his command. However, Luke came to his senses and refused to join the dark side. Cyas couldn't understand the compassion the boy felt for Vader, and when he tried to strike the young Jedi down with Force lightning, Vader instead struck his master down once and for all. What makes Darth Cyas so iconic has to be just how cunning and manipulative he is. It almost feels like he was always 2 steps ahead of everyone, and somehow he always managed to change everything around him to aid his plan. Seeing him manipulate Anakin truly fills up my heart with hatred, and that's a sign of a villain done right.
That it is I, then Vladimir Hinan, who encompasses his doom.
Vladimir Hinan, Dune, 1984. On the topic of manipulative tyrants who managed to get the way by abusing everyone who stood in their path, we got Vladimir Hinan from Dune. I know you're probably thinking of Villeneuve's version, as it came out pretty recently, and I'm not saying that the Baron there is any less terrifying, but I'm referring to the Baron we saw in David Lynch's Dune, which came out in 1984, played by the outstanding Kenneth McMillan. This Baron is not as stoic as the one we've seen in recent years. He quite likes that he's a sadist who managed to kill the entire Atreides bloodline with the help of Shaddam's troops. However, no one even knew just how cruel he was or how he was ruining everyone's lives around him simply because of how charming he was. I mean, Frank Herbert was right. It's usually the charm of people that makes it hard for everyone to understand just how vile the person behind the charm truly is. This Baron is a vile man. He's a control freak, and he has no qualms or shame about his hedonistic ways of life. He's a cunning, manipulative tyrant who manages to bring power to his family line by controlling every aspect of things around him. He not only killed the Duke Atreides, but he ensured everyone knew that he was the one who took him down. While it might seem like it's because he wants to flex his big win against his enemy, there's more to it. He wanted the world around him to fall into chaos now that the Duke was dead, only so that he could put out his nephew as the peacebringer. It was supposed to be Glossu Raban, but as Raban turned out to be far too brash to sit on the throne, the Baron changed his tactics and started preferring Fade Routher over Raban. This resulted in 2 things. He still has significant control over his successor, whoever it may be. He pitted the 2 against each other. When he learned that Fade was trying to murder him, the Baron didn't lose his composure. He instead wanted his nephew to keep it up because the kid needed some experience in conspiracy. However, the assassination attempt failed, and the Baron made sure Fade learned the price of failure. Vladimir's rule as the head of the House Harkonnen is notoriously cruel. He was more than happy to use blackmail, torture, murder, slavery, and bribes to get his way. He even made a show out of killing people over trivial matters just to ensure no one ever dared to go up against him. The fact that Paul Atreides is his grandson and Jessica is his daughter didn't dissuade him from trying to kill them. It just goes to show how ruthless he can be. Ironically, the long drawn-out fight between the Harkonnen and Atreides started out because Abelard Harkonnen decided to be merciful when he was expected to kill, and this compassion for other lives being lost in translation over generations while the hatred only got stronger is just sad.
There she is. Not so.
Khan Noonien Singh, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, 1982. With the advancement of science in recent years, I'll not be surprised if genetically modifying humans to make them the ultimate super soldier becomes the norm a few decades down the road. But the result of such an experiment was very well depicted in Star Trek II with Khan Noonien Singh. He was an augmented being created to be a superhuman. He was meant to be a force for good, but he had ambitions. He had dreams, and these turned him to take a darker route. When the eugenics wars took place in the 1990s, Khan was the one who controlled more than a quarter of the Earth. And when he was awoken from his suspected reanimation in 2267 by the helpful crew of Starship Enterprise, Khan thanked them for their generous help in trying to capture the starship. James T. Kirk managed to exile him to SETI Alpha 5, but that didn't stop Khan's ideas. No. 15 years after this event, Khan exiled SETI Alpha 5 with one goal on his mind: revenge on Kirk. Khan was willing to do anything that he could to see Kirk fall. He was more than willing to mind control people if it meant he could spy on Kirk and destroy him. Although he does get defeated at the end of the movie because of his inexperience with three-dimensional space combat and Spock deceiving him, seeing him turn on the Genesis device, knowing very well he'd die when it goes off, was indeed a harrowing scene. His hatred for Kirk is so profound that he's willing to kill himself as long as he can take his foe with him. And obviously, you can forget him quoting Ahab's words of vengeance before dying. Ricardo Montalban may have been playing the bad guy in the movie, but he definitely stuck my breath with his gut-wrenching performance. Honestly, it was Khan's ambition and desire for power that became his undoing.
You better get it up.
Roy Batty, Blade Runner, 1982. While on the surface, you might look at Roy Batty and think he's a villain. After all, he's the rebellious replicant who wanted to increase his lifespan and committed heinous acts to achieve that. But I feel like that deep down we can all agree he's more of an anti-villain. He's a man-like machine that was created, not born. But what did he get out of it? He had to suffer from injustices pushed onto him by his creator so that he couldn't have a free life. This was to prevent Roy from getting a sentient mind. But when you create a man-like machine, how can you truly prevent that from happening? In the Blade Runner universe, these replicants were used as slaves as army fodder. Every replicant that you come across in the movie seems to have served in the military, and given that they were designed not to have human emotions, these replicants were meant to never know that they were being used. But if the replicants were given a lot of time, then they'd end up developing their own set of feelings and emotions, which would eventually lead to a rebellion, which wasn't something anyone wanted. So, to prevent that, these replicants were given a lifespan of 4 years. Roy was created to act as a combatant to prevent humans from dying in wars in the off-world military campaigns. But he was tired of living this way, so he and his 4 replicant friends killed 23 humans in an off-world colony. They even hijacked a ship to come to Earth. He did all of this because Roy felt fear. Even though the replicants were given this baseline personality that only helps them with their service, Roy's life, experience, and environment led to him feeling fear and desire to survive longer. Roy simply wanted to live longer, but the way he went about it led to him being a wanted terrorist. He ended up hurting everyone around him. While we don't know what could have exactly caused Roy to want to live longer, I think his budding relationship with Pris was the reason that made him this way. I mean, love is a great motivator, but when Roy realized Tyrell couldn't do anything to increase his lifespan, Roy killed Tyrell for making him this way. When Deckard killed Pris, Roy decided to chase him down. He wanted to avenge his love, and so the cat and mouse game started. Roy chased Deckard and taunted him, and eventually, when the human who murdered the love of his life was hanging off the edge of a building, Roy decided to help him. In that one moment, Roy became more human than any of the biological humans on screen. He chose to be compassionate and merciful, and how is that not the most human thing to do? It could be that he saw a bit of himself in Deckard, a man who's just doing his job, the same way Roy spent the first years of his life, simply doing his job. Maybe that's why Roy saved him. Although he is the villain of the story, Roy is a good guy who just went about things the wrong way. And while I'm not excusing his horrible acts, seeing him save Deckard really redeemed him in my eyes. Roy's act of mercy was a memorable moment that proved that replicants are much more human than one imagined them to be, and it changed Deckard's life for the better after that. Or maybe that's what Roy hoped.
I'm gravely disappointed. Again, you have made me unleash my total support.
Lord Humongous, Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, 1981. I know there are so many iconic villains when it comes to the Mad Max series, but if I had to pick anyone from the entire villain roster, I'd choose Lord Humongous. The way his dialogue with Wes humanizes him while his actions dehumanize him is a great contrast, and I immensely enjoy it. For those who don't know, he's this dangerous gang lord with his very own batshit insane biker gang who ends up getting in a conflict with our boy Max. While we don't know his backstory truthfully, it was implied in an interview with the writers that he was a military soldier who ended up being burned completely, and after his wife/girlfriend was murdered, he went utterly unhinged. In this post-apocalyptic world, Humongous is after an oil refinery that he heard about. He wanted to get the oil all for himself and his army, and he promised not to harm anyone if they surrendered peacefully. However, let's be honest, he was obviously not going to hold up his end of the bargain. He was this barbaric warlord, and the moment Max came into the picture, trying to save the inhabitants of the oil refinery, Humongous's mask slipped. He went after Max, brutalizing anyone who dared to stand in his path. It was immensely satisfying when he was killed by the collision that he created, and I think that if you love it when the villain is killed, it makes the villain quite iconic.
Hey, wait a minute. Wait a minute!
Clarence J. Bodica, Robocup, 1987. If you're an 80s kid, there's no way you've missed out on Robocup. That movie was quite the hit, and rightfully so. Officer Alex Murphy truly was a character we could root for. Seeing Clarence J. Bodicker finally get his comeuppance is satisfying as all hell. But why do we hate Clarence? Well, the answer is simple. This unofficial crime lord of Detroit is just straight up bananas. He's inhuman, he's calculative, he's cruel, and he literally doesn't care about anything other than his goal. Seeing him chuck his loyal subordinate out of the car to act as a distraction for the police car after them makes it very clear just how cold this guy is. But his coldness comes to a whole new level when we see him kill Alex. See, Alex and his partner Ann Lewis went into the steel mill where Clarence and his group were hiding. On arriving there, Lewis was soon knocked unconscious by one of the gang members, and Murphy ended up getting cornered by the rest of the gang, who wanted him very dead very soon. But Clarence wasn't going to let his gang members have the fun, so he decided to pull them all back and get into the nitty-gritty of questioning and torture himself. Why? Because he liked it. He asks Murphy where his partner is, and when Murphy doesn't open up, Clarence repeatedly beats him with a sawn-off shotgun. Then, to make it worse, when he did learn about Lewis, Clarence decided to torture Murphy just for funsies. He traced Murphy's right arm with the shotgun while holding it under his boot, only to shoot it off at the wrist. And in this grave moment, Clarence joked and asked his subordinates to give Alex a hand. After this sick joke, Clarence lets his subordinates loose on Alex, who shoots him up. But when Clarence realized that Murphy was still breathing, he leisurely strolled over to Murphy and shot him with his prized Desert Eagle, killing the officer for good. Obviously, this whole scene is quite difficult to watch. But things get turned up a notch when Clarence goes to kill off Bob Morton. He literally strolls into Bob's living room and opens fire on Bob, hitting him in the knee after obliterating the man's kneecap. Clarence casually strolled around Bob's room, snorting up some cocaine while a message from Dick Jones, the guy who put a hit on Bob Morton, played on his entertainment system. Then Clarence slowly pulled the pin out of a grenade with his tongue and walked out of the room with no hurry, leaving the grenade with the crippled man. His tendency to joke casually after hurting people definitely left a mark on me. His death was definitely satisfying to watch.
I must get up now, right now, and fulfill my destiny. Now you put your...
Gregory Amos Stilson, The Dead Zone, 1983. Starting off as a traveling salesman who went to rural Iowa and killed a rabid dog to death, Gregory Amos Stilson went through several odd occupations while he believed that he was desired for greatness. When he arrived in Ridgeway, New Hampshire, in 1971, Stilson decided to get into local business and politics. He hired the local biker gang to be his thugs by blackmailing their leader. And with the bikers acting as his thugs, Stilson quickly developed his reputation of straightening out teenagers using a clandestine process, when really he was out physically and emotionally torturing them. As he started rising in power, one day he had a meeting with Johnny Smith. Smith realized that Stilson would eventually end up becoming the president of the USA and would end up worsening the international conflict, which would result in a nuclear war. Obviously wanting to prevent that bleak future, Johnny decided to come to Jackson, where Stilson was supposed to arrive for a town hall meeting. When Stilson begins his rally, Smith shoots at him from his sniper's nest. However, Smith misses several times and ends up mortally wounded. However, his efforts didn't prove to be in vain, because selfish Stilson decided to use a little child as his human shield when Smith was firing at him. A news photographer managed to get a picture of that, and obviously that'd prevent Stilson from rising to power for good and subverting the future Johnny was so scared of. Stephen King's definitely created some iconic villains, but Gregory Amos Stilson is so iconic because he's believable. So many people are just this selfish, this self-centered who walk with us on a day-to-day basis, but no one knows. Stilson is a morally twisted character, and seeing how no one saw it at first is absolutely terrifying.
Guns are out. Damage control's repairing them. Forget the guns! Planning...
Lord Krill, The Last Starfighter, 1984. Lord Krill is a villain who's worth remembering because despite being an evil being, he has his moral code, and I quite like that. In the movie, Lord Krill was the one who was supposed to oversee the attack on the Starfighter Command. This attack was supposed to be the precursor to the invasion of Rylos. He's a very competent officer, but he wasn't the one who was in charge of the whole attack. The guy in charge was Xur. Xur was pretty strange and had relatively poor tactical decisions. Xur assumed that Alex Rogan was killed on Earth and was leading his merry life thinking that. Krill decided to throw over Xur's captaincy and take over the power, only to realize Alex Rogan was very much still alive. What really made me sad in the movie was when Alex crippled the guidance control of the ship. Xur, the main moron, managed to get out of the ship, but Krill, who wasn't necessarily a bad guy, ended up dying.
To me, son of Jor-El, kneel before Zod!
General Zod, Superman 2, 1980. The memorable nemesis of Superman, who was coincidentally from Krypton, definitely deserves a spot on our list. He's one of the greatest enemies that our Man of Steel has ever faced. Played by Terrence Stamp, General Zod is the main antagonist in the 1980 film Superman 2. General Zod was exiled to the Phantom Zone by his people due to his treason against his people by Jor-El. The Phantom Zone was this interdimensional trajectory that Jor-El created, which was this huge void. Obviously, General Zod wasn't too happy about being exiled to this void, so when Krypton was eventually destroyed, he managed to survive. Now, when he escaped from the void, he was out for vengeance. He escaped the void with Ursa and Nun, and together they reached Earth to pair up with Lex Luthor so that they could defeat Superman. Zod wanted to overthrow the Kryptonian Council, but he found Jor-El to be quite cowardly for accepting the council. As Jor-El didn't do anything to save him, Zod was adamant about ruining him and his son. His desire for vengeance and glory is what makes him so memorable. His military training, paired with all the perks that Kryptonians get on Earth, definitely makes him a tough foe to beat.
Is what you are in the dark. We must work.
Lord John Worfin, The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension, 1984. Played by John Lithgow, Dr. Emilio Lizardo is the villain in The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension. Lord Worfin is the titular leader of the Red Lectroids, who have been fighting with the inhabitants of Planet 10, commonly known as the Black Lectroids, for a long time. He's this ruthless dictator who often reminds the Black Lectroids of Hitler. When he was defeated by the Black Lectroids, he was exiled to the Eighth Dimension with his army. In there, he came across Dr. Emilio Lizardo, who got trapped there in 1938. Lord Worfin took over Lizardo's body and eventually ended up on Earth. There, however, he was trapped in the Trenton home for the criminally insane for 50 years. When he saw that Buckaroo Banzai managed to get through the Eighth Dimension, Worfin escaped. He wanted to steal the contraption Buckaroo was using to get his army from the Eighth Dimension. However, the plan didn't work out, so Lord Worfin tasked his minions to hold Banzai's dead girlfriend's twin sister hostage until Banzai gave him the contraption known as the Overthruster. Lord Worfin tries to escape to Planet 10 using the untested prototype of the Overthruster, but his ship gets destroyed by Banzai, bringing an end to his life. Although this film is a comedy sci-fi genre, Lord Worfin is a maniac who only cares about his goals and wants. His selfish acts and the way he treats his minions definitely earned him a spot on our list. Marvelous verdict. With that, guys, we've come to the end of our list. Science fiction itself is an astounding genre, but with an absolutely abhorrent villain, the genre seems much more fulfilled. I can't really choose between them because they're all so enticing in their own ways. But do let us know in the comments which villain you like the best out of all the ones we've mentioned here and why. Until I see you guys next time, take care.
And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.